Speaking of Republicans who are willing to call out Donald Trump, Christie went on CNN and issued a warning of sorts to Donald Trump that he's in big doo-doo, big trouble when it comes to his legal troubles. And more specifically, as you might know, by the way, Christie, former federal prosecutor, so he has some knowledge on these subjects, specifically references and is responding to the thing we've been covering extensively, which is the phenomenon of Trump going on national TV, engaging in these interviews, and just incriminating himself blatantly. For example, when he gets asked about classified documents in interviews, he'll say something that just seems to indicate he's saying he did all the things, but just thinks it's okay that he did them. Not disputing the facts of the indictment, but just disputing that it's against the law. And will say, oh yeah, I'm allowed to do all that because of the Presidential Records Act. So if you're accepting, Trump, the premise of you doing all the things, but then just saying, and you as the legal expert that you're not, know that it's okay because of the Presidential Records Act, which doesn't even apply. That's not at all correct. Non-legal experts can figure that out. Then your future legal prospects are not so great. And that also applies to some stuff we've covered recently in regard to his other indictments as well. And so Christie here breaks that down, says his lawyers probably want to vomit every time he goes on TV, and he's in big trouble.
But I want to ask about something else, because you mentioned you are a former federal prosecutor. Former President Donald Trump was asked over the weekend whether or not he was listening to lawyers or acting on his own accord when it came to challenging the election results, trying to overturn the election. This is what he said.
You called some of your outside lawyers. You said they had crazy theories. Why were you listening to them? Were you listening to them because they were telling you what you wanted to hear?
You know who I listened to myself?
Were you calling the shots, though, Mr. President, ultimately?
As to whether or not I believed it was rigged? Oh, sure.
Okay.
It was my decision.
Does that hurt a legal defense that he could try to use?
Every time he opens his mouth, his lawyers must want to vomit. I mean, this is a guy who is just burying himself deeper and deeper, taking away any potential defense he has to the charges that have been brought against him. But incredibly, I think, for one of the rare times in his life, Donald Trump is actually telling the truth. I think he was the person who made these decisions. I think he is responsible for his own conduct. And like any adult should be responsible for their own conduct. But I will tell you, if I was his defense lawyer, I'd want to jump out a window every time this guy gets in front of a microphone or in front of a screen to send something out.
I'll play more of this in a moment, but it's exactly right there. So I broke down the classified documents example there, as we did a segment on. He's getting asked about his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results, allegedly, according to the prosecutors, unlawfully, and is proudly proclaiming that it was him making the decisions. He was going off of his own judgment, his own instinct, which then dismantles what would be a likely expected argument that he would make in defense of himself, which would be cast the blame on others. I was just taking advice from my lawyers. What, I can't take advice of lawyers now, you're saying? You know, that type of rhetoric. I was just following the lead of others. So maybe it's their issue. They were coming up with these schemes and I just thought, okay, I'll go along with it, and didn't intervene, but it's not really my thing. But now he's saying it was my thing, and that's rough for him. Continuing.
Out on Truth Social. Look, this is why we as Republicans cannot nominate him again. You never know what's going to come out of his mouth next. He gets himself in deeper and deeper trouble. He will be sitting in a courtroom every day for all of March and most of April, while we should be out there fighting Joe Biden and the Democrats to re-win the White House and take control of Congress. That's why I'm the right person to do this. I will be bringing that fight to him. I won't have to be spending 5 minutes inside a courtroom. Donald Trump will be. Whether you think those charges are fair or not, and I know there's disagreement with some in our party about that, the fact is they are a reality. And his conduct, which, as you saw from that interview, he doesn't deny his conduct. Caitlin, well, if you don't deny the conduct, then you're in very, very big trouble. And he is in big trouble. And if we nominate him, our party will be in big trouble.
I think Trump's ego doesn't let him just not respond to these questions. Because here's the smart way to go about this as you're preparing for criminal trials. Say, listen, obviously, lots of sensitivity on these subjects. So just for the sake of legal wisdom and based on the advice of my lawyers, I'm not going to respond to your specific questions about what I did, what I didn't do. But here's what I want to say. And then he would say, it's all unfair. It's all a witch hunt. But I'm not going to speak to any of your questions about the particulars. Because then he has this whole web of statements he's made publicly that his lawyers are going to have to get all stuck in while they try to figure out how to defend him. Because when it comes to the fake electors scheme, these forms that were fraudulent signed were the duly and qualified electors of the state of blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Trying to get those to be acknowledged as the lawful electors instead of the actual ones sent through our actual process by the states, then counted. Okay. Trump could go, it would be expected for this type of situation, even though it's unprecedented, but the expectation was, oh, the fake electors, I don't know. And often Trump doesn't engage in written or recorded conversations that could be sort of incriminating. So, except for sometimes, but often he tries to avoid that. And so he could say, there's no conversation where I'm telling people, do the fake elector scheme. And okay, these witnesses are just trying to get out of their own legal troubles. The co-conspirators saying that I was passionate about that being one of the schemes we use. I wasn't directing this. Now it's going to be harder to say that. It'll also be harder because we've talked about how one of the electors has, in a court filing, pointed the finger at Trump. And also Mark Meadows is expected to testify to the fact that Donald Trump was really focused on the fake elector scheme. And that's one example. Then we move on to the Mike Pence stuff and on and on and on. And so he is, in an attempt to get the public on his side, making it a lot harder later to get the jury on his side. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show and get a bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That's lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. And there's a link in the description.